we didn't know until quite late, until we started working with scripts and things like that, and it just kind of worked out that I had a boy and Samantha had a girl.
Elizabeth Montgomery's daughter has just stunned all of Hollywood by breaking 3 decades of silence. My mother betrayed everyone, her husband, her father, and even the angelic image the world worshipped. She believed magic could make people forget the truth. Those words fell like a curse. Because Elizabeth was not only Samantha the witch from Bewitched, but also an icon of beauty, grace, and the smile that once enchanted America. Yet behind that glamour lay a life woven with cracks, a daughter rejected by her father, a wife who betrayed, and a woman who truly believed that magic could change fate. So why did it take 30 years after her death for Elizabeth's daughter to finally speak the truth? What made the family keep that story hidden for nearly half a century? Was it fear? Or because they too believed that the bewitched curse might be real? Let's go back to 1951 when 18-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery stood before the gates of Hollywood and declared, "I will write the magic of my own life." But no one knew that this very sentence would mark the beginning of a lifelong tragedy. New York winter of 1951. The wind whistled through the long streets, and in a red brick house on East 60th Street, 18-year-old Elizabeth Montgomery stood before the biggest decision of her life. She had just signed her enrollment papers for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the very school her father, the famous actor Robert Montgomery, had sworn his daughter would never set foot in. Robert was a star of Hollywood's golden age, a sophisticated, confident, and arrogant man whose every word became law. In the family mansion in Beverly Hills, everything was arranged to perfection, cold and immaculate. Dinner was a ritual. Elizabeth had to sit straight, never speak unless spoken to, and was absolutely forbidden to mention the words acting or film. He often repeated the same line, his voice calm but filled with disdain. Hollywood is no place for a decent woman. To Robert, art was the world of pretenders, and he would never let his daughter become one of them. Yet inside that strict household, Elizabeth's passion burned quietly, dangerous, and unstoppable. From a young age, she had loved following her father to film sets. She loved the way light reflected on the actors' faces, the hum of the camera, like the heartbeat of another world, a world where people could live many lives within minutes. At 17, during a visit to the MGM studio, Elizabeth watched her father perform and whispered, "Daddy, I want to stand there in front of the camera like you." Robert turned to her, his gaze icy. He replied curtly, "No, I didn't raise an actress, I raised a lady." Those words cut deep like a knife. Elizabeth said nothing more, but in her heart she swore. If her father wouldn't give her a chance, she would make one herself. A few months later, she secretly sent in her application, telling no one, leaving only a short note on her father's desk, "I'm going to learn how to live, not how to please you." When Robert found out, he exploded. The maid later said he threw the letter to the floor, stomped on it, and roared, That girl will regret ever bearing the Montgomery name." From that day, the house fell into silence. Father and daughter barely spoke, The air was so heavy that one could hear the sound of silverware striking porcelain at dinner. But ironically, it was Robert himself who unintentionally opened Elizabeth's first door to acting. When his TV show, Robert Montgomery Presents, premiered, he let her appear, in a small role, a supposed gesture of reconciliation. However, on the day of broadcast, when the name Elizabeth Montgomery appeared on screen, Robert became furious. He lit a cigarette, narrowed his eyes, and ordered erase that name from my show. No one uses my name to make themselves famous. The entire crew fell silent. That night, Elizabeth went home, locked her room, lit a candle, and wrote in her diary, "If my father won't let me bear the Montgomery name, I'll make the world remember it." From that moment, she chose her own path, a path with no room for forgiveness. She left home, rented a small apartment in Manhattan, worked nights, and studied acting by day. Every role she took, even the smallest one, was a silent act of rebellion against her father. Meanwhile, at Beverly Hills parties, Robert would coldly tell his friends, "That girl is no daughter of mine." Years later, when Elizabeth had become a television star, one of Robert's old friends recalled seeing him sitting alone in a bar, eyes fixed on a TV screen showing Bewitched. When Elizabeth Montgomery's name appeared, he smiled faintly and said hoarsely, "She's good, but she'll never escape my shadow." No one knew whether that smile held pride or bitterness. But to Elizabeth, it no longer mattered. She had won. She was herself, standing before the camera, as she had always dreamed. Yet the price of that freedom was her father's rejection, and a wound she could never heal. Like a compass drawn by an invisible magnetic field named Robert Montgomery, the more she tried to escape, the more Elizabeth revolved back toward his shadow. And when she stepped out of her family's door, into her own life, her love affairs began to trace that same pattern, painful, recurring, and undeniable. New York, 1954. After 2 years of studying and performing in Manhattan, Elizabeth did what Robert had always wanted. She married Frederick Gallatin Kemen, a young, wealthy businessman, the perfect gentleman by Montgomery standards. The wedding was small and elegant, held in New York at the start of spring, complete with white flowers, crystal glasses, and all the stability blessings Robert admired. It seemed Elizabeth had compromised, but just a few months later the wedding dress hung untouched in the closet, and she stood in the apartment overlooking the Hudson River, realizing she had become someone's wife, not Elizabeth. Frederick was kind, polite, and attentive, but he wanted her to step back, leave the stage, and become a pleasant painting in an Upper East Side living room. By autumn, the marriage ended as neatly as it began. Elizabeth left New York with a sharp lesson. Love is never enough if the other person cannot accept your dreams. Los Angeles, 1956. On the West Coast, Hollywood lights burst like fireworks on the 4th of July, and Elizabeth fell into the arms of Gig Young, a famous actor, handsome, charming, dangerous. He had something she couldn't explain: power. That power, she would later realize, was the echo of her father. Hollywood whispered that at a Beverly Hills party in 1956, Robert coldly declared before a crowd, "She's no longer my daughter." If true, those words struck Elizabeth's heart like a hammer, and perhaps pushed her deeper into her affair with Gig, a choice both rebellious and self-punishing. because beneath that charm lay alcohol, rage, and violence. Once on the Culver City set, people saw Elizabeth step out of a trailer with smeared lipstick and red eyes. Gig, with an icy smile, muttered through his teeth that she was too sensitive to be an actress. That love was a slope slick with sweat and tears. When it ended, Elizabeth emerged like a survivor of a wreck, breathing, but with a shard of glass in her chest that could never be removed. 1963. Malibu Sunset Gower Studios. Then came William Asher, rising like the sun over the ocean. He wasn't just a talented director. He understood Elizabeth, her rhythm on set, the fear behind her eyes, the way she built her characters from invisible details. They fell in love through their work, and their work bloomed into an American television monument, Bewitched, 1964. Los Angeles in the mid-1960s was an improvisational jazz tune, vibrant, floating, unpredictable. Elizabeth's Samantha twitched her nose on screen. And in real life, she and William had children, a family, and a television empire built around them. People said that on stage 5, the studio felt like a house with a warm kitchen. Elizabeth was pregnant. The scripts cleverly carried her real belly through humorous episodes, and William stood behind the monitor, smiling every time she caught the rhythm of the audience. It was the most beautiful time in Elizabeth's life, but also the moment when the Montgomery loop quietly began. Because William was not only her soulmate, he was also her metronome and sometimes her controller. He was brilliant, logical, and decisive. She was grateful for that until she began to suffocate. Inside, William was a refined replica of Robert, a certainty in himself so strong it consumed others without realizing it. When love gave way to production schedules, they began to miss each other. A compliment swallowed in the hallway, a hand reaching out on stage, but not met. Beverly Hills, late 1960s. Long parties, late-night phone calls, and whispers of William's infidelity slipped through the doors like midnight wind. Elizabeth said nothing, but in her diary, she wrote a single dry line. "I like a man who pauses to hear himself breathe." At the edge, when the cracks had turned to fractures, Elizabeth sought a new rhythm beside Richard Michaels, the young director of Bewitched's 8th season. In Richard, she found the gaze of someone who truly listened, not to a star, but to a woman. They began a secret affair, and the price came swiftly, like a clean cut on the Columbia Screen Gems lot in 1972. Whispers turned into noise. When the secret went public, it burned through every remaining thread, connecting the cast, the crew, and the couple at the center of the storm. Bewitched ended abruptly in its 8th season, as if someone had flipped a switch mid-laughter. People called it the chain of betrayals. William betrayed first, Elizabeth later. And she, in a helpless instant, saw herself repeating what she had once despised in her father, hurting others while believing she was right. Guilt has a lingering scent, and it followed Elizabeth for years after. 1973 and 1980s, learning to breathe again. When the studio lights went out, Elizabeth left behind the parties, the empty praise, the cold touches. And then she met Robert Foxworth. Not lightning, but a lake. Not dominance, but presence. In Encino, and later in Beverly Hills, they lived an ordinary enough life for Elizabeth to realize what she had never truly known: peace. Foxworth didn't try to fix her or to set the tempo for her. He simply stood beside her so she could find balance on her own. If William was a refined mirror of Robert Fauntleroy, was the reflection of peace she had searched for her whole life. They lived together for years before marrying officially, a calm, quiet choice, like returning the wedding dress to the glass case of memory and choosing instead a warm sweater for the windy days of Laurel Canyon. In that stillness, Elizabeth finally looked directly into the Montgomery loop. Frederick was safe, but demanded she give up her selfhood. The gig was powerful, violent as hail. William, the controlling genius, turned love into orchestration. Richard's escape was brief and costly, and Warrior was the first man to rest his hand on her shoulder without pushing her in any direction, only to let her know she could stay. When she placed all of their faces side by side, Elizabeth realized she had chosen men who each carried her father's message. Be quiet. Be good. Stay still, only in varying forms and intensities. And every time she resisted that message, her life broke another piece. It was only with Foxworth that the message changed: you can be you. After 1975, Elizabeth rarely spoke of her private life. At Santa Monica Pier on a windy afternoon, she told a reporter, "I no longer need to break something to prove I exist. I just need to breathe." The words sounded as light as the sea, but they were the manifesto of a woman who had just walked out of a maze. Love was no longer a battle, no longer a mirror for her father. It was finally a place to rest. Looking back on her life, Elizabeth's romances form a map of concentric circles. At the center, Robert Montgomery. The first ring, men like her father. The second, her acts of rebellion still orbiting within his gravity. And the outermost ring, wide and still, Robert Fauntleroy. From New York, 1954, to Los Angeles, 1972, her love life was a series of losses and experiments that led her to one simple truth. The young often forget freedom is not doing what you want in front of someone. It's not needing anyone's permission to do it. Later, when illness came knocking in early 1995, Foxworth was still there holding her hand, reading fan letters, helping her stand through fatigue. Her final love was quiet, unprovable, undemanding. It was like a room with open windows where Elizabeth could lay down every role, even Samantha, even Robert's daughter, and simply be Elizabeth, tired enough to need a shoulder, strong enough to forgive, especially herself. If one were to name the red thread running through Elizabeth Montgomery's entire love story, it would be the yearning to be herself while standing beside another. And only after passing through Frederick, Gig William, and Richard, the repetitions of her father, did she reach Foxworth, where the loop ended. There, Elizabeth no longer loved in defiance, nor for validation. She loved simply to live, and for the first time, that love didn't make her smaller. It expanded her gently, quietly, and strong enough to carry her through the rest of her days in Beverly Hills, 1995. After escaping the whirlwind of painful relationships, Elizabeth thought she had found peace in her final marriage with Robert Foxworth. But as someone too familiar with turbulence, she could never live entirely in stillness. When love no longer consumed her heart, Elizabeth returned to what had always defined her, the lights of the studio. And with that return, another part of her began to emerge. Elizabeth Montgomery, the woman who believed in real magic. On-screen Samantha, the character in Bewitched, only needed a twitch of her nose to change the world around her. But off-screen Elizabeth Montgomery believed there were invisible forces more powerful than talent or scripts, energies she felt she had inherited. Los Angeles, 1966. When Bewitched was at its peak, no one on set doubted that Elizabeth had become the soul of the studio. Every morning before filming began, she arrived earlier than everyone else. People said she always carried a small stone in her pocket, a charm she called the energy charm, brought from a small village in Massachusetts, the same region once home to the Salem witch trials. She believed the stone kept a positive energy frequency around her, helping each shoot run smoothly. Her co-star, Agnes Moorehead, who played Samantha's mother, once said, "Before every scene, Elizabeth wouldn't talk to anyone. She'd just sit still, hands on her knees, eyes closed, murmuring something softly. When she opened her eyes, she seemed like a different person, lighter, brighter, but also further away." Rumors spread quickly. A lighting technician said that one night, after everyone had left, he returned to turn off the lights and saw Elizabeth alone in the dressing room, candlelight flickering her lips, whispering what sounded like an incantation. When asked, she just smiled and said it was a little ritual to send good energy for tomorrow. To some, it was merely an odd habit. But in Hollywood, where every mystery can turn into scandal, it was quickly blown up. Tabloids called her the witch off-screen. A 1967 magazine headline screamed, "Elizabeth Montgomery, the girl who doesn't just play a witch, she lives like one." The more people gossiped, the quieter Elizabeth became. She didn't defend herself, didn't get angry, only kept that faint, unreadable smile that made everyone even more curious. Sometimes her silence made the rumors seem more believable. One crew member said, "One day, she walked onto the set, blew a kiss toward the empty audience seats, and said, 'Thank you for today's energy.' No one knew who she was talking to. But that day, every take was perfect. Just one shot, no retakes." Some close colleagues defended her. They said Elizabeth wasn't superstitious. She was spiritual. She believed in good energy, in the resonance between emotion and outcome. A lighting director once said maybe she didn't truly think she was a witch. But I think she believed in the power of thought. And sometimes belief itself is a kind of magic. Still, not everyone could accept it. Some crew members began keeping their distance. They feared her eyes, too deep, too calm, as if they could see through all of Hollywood's illusions. A few even whispered that Elizabeth carried strange energy, causing mysterious mishaps. On set, falling microphones, flickering lights, props moving without touch. Of course, no one ever proved anything. But in an industry where coincidence easily becomes omen, the name Elizabeth Montgomery, the real-life witch, spread like legend. When a reporter directly asked her about it in a 1970 interview, Elizabeth just laughed. Resting her chin on her hand, eyes bright but wistful, she said, "If believing in good things is magic, then I suppose I really am a witch." That answer, gentle, profound, and perfectly ambiguous, made audiences love her even more. They believed Elizabeth's magic didn't come from curses or spells, but from a light within her, the belief that anyone could change reality with love, kindness, and a little courage. But perhaps that very belief also led Elizabeth to drift from the tangible world. Toward the late 1970s, she became increasingly private. Friends said she often sat alone for hours by the window, candles flickering, soft jazz playing, writing strange notes in her journal. The light inside me is still fine. Some said she was talking to herself. Others believed she was speaking to another world, one without betrayal, without her father's shadow, without heartbreak. Either way, Elizabeth Montgomery became something Hollywood had never seen before, a witch without a wand, without spells, yet one who made people both believe and fear and could never stop loving her. From those small candles and whispered words in the dark, people said Elizabeth Montgomery brought with her a strange energy to the set. But that energy did more than make the cameras run smoothly. It made everyone around her both admire and fear her. Because behind the lens, Samantha the Witch was no longer the sweet wife of television screens. She was the true queen of the Bewitched set. On screen, Samantha is gentle, mischievous, and always solves every problem with a charming nose twitch. Off-screen, however, Elizabeth Montgomery was a perfectionist to the point of obsession. On stage 5 in Hollywood, she was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. Every shot, every light, every line, she kept an eye on it. If something wasn't right, Elizabeth would stop the scene immediately. One crew member recalled, "No one dared turn on the lights until she nodded." She never got angry by shouting. Instead, her silence was more frightening. When Elizabeth was displeased, the air on set grew heavy, like thunder waiting to explode. A few minutes of her silence were enough to make the director or cinematographer redo an entire sequence. Many on the crew half-jokingly, half-seriously called her the controlling witch, someone who could command everything with a look. Her relationship with Dick York, who played Darren Samantha's husband, is the clearest example of this. At first, they got along well, laughing and chatting comfortably on set. But as Bewitched grew more popular, the workload increased, and Dick began having health problems. The atmosphere between them gradually turned tense. Elizabeth, strict by nature, demanded every scene be perfect, while Dick, with a chronic back injury from an earlier set accident, often had to stop to rest midway. One day, in early 1968, while filming the episode A Very Special Delivery, Dick York collapsed mid-scene. The whole crew panicked. Elizabeth was the first to run over, but instead of fussing, she fell silent, her eyes resting on him for a second before turning away. After that day, the air between them changed completely. Dick took a long leave, and in the following episodes, they barely spoke outside the scenes. A crew member said she never looked him straight in the eye again. When the camera stopped, they split to opposite corners of the set, like two magnets with the same pole. By 1960, as Dick's condition worsened, the studio faced a choice: either end Bewitched or find a replacement. Rumors spread along Hollywood Boulevard that Elizabeth had applied direct pressure on Screen Gems, demanding York be replaced by Dick Sargent, whom she believed was more in sync and more professional. The studio complied, and Sargent appeared on screen in the 6th season. The decision shocked audiences. York's fans reacted fiercely, sending protest letters to AEC accusing Elizabeth of pushing a colleague out of the game. She never publicly responded to the matter. When asked in a brief 1970 interview, Elizabeth simply said, "We had to keep going. Every kind of magic needs change to survive." That ambiguous answer only deepened the divide. Some defended her, others criticized. But one thing no one denied after that upheaval: Elizabeth completely commanded the set. From directors and cinematographers to supporting actors, everyone was wary of her. They knew she didn't raise her bites or bark orders. But if Elizabeth wasn't satisfied, the scene would be redone, even if it was technically perfect. People said no one dares go against Elizabeth, not even the director. There was even a time she demanded the entire lighting setup be changed simply because she felt the energy isn't clear today. Strangely, after the change, that scene was hail-sold as one of the season's most beautiful sequences. A former colleague, second unit director Michael Gordon, once said, "She didn't need power, she radiated it." But that very force also made Elizabeth lonely. After each day's shoot, when the crew went off to a bar on Melrose Avenue, she would quietly leave the studio and return to her small house in Beverly Hills, where only soft jazz and candlelight awaited her. By the end of 1972, when Bewitched wrapped after its 8th season, Elizabeth held no farewell party and didn't appear for a wrap-up interview. She simply sent the studio a note. "Thank you for the magic. It's time for Samantha to sleep." After that, she left Hollywood and took on almost no major projects for many years. People still spoke of her as a real witch, someone who could make an entire crew yield with a single glance, who could turn the set into a world of her own, and who also paid dearly for that power. When the lights went out, Elizabeth Montgomery stood alone in an empty room, quietly staring into the makeup mirror, the reflection of Samantha's face looking back, but in those eyes, no sparkle of magic remained. After Bewitched ended, Elizabeth Montgomery stepped away from the studio lights, and it seemed she could finally live a quiet life with her 4th husband, Robert Forth. But Hollywood never forgot that name. Every time television reran the old episodes of Bewitched, viewers saw Samantha's smile again, bright, weightless, seemingly immortal. No one expected that the woman who once made the whole world believe in magic was slowly facing the one thing no magic could change: death. Miami, spring 1995. Elizabeth was 62, filming the TV movie Deadline for Murder from the files of Edna Buchanan. In the sweltering noon heat, she felt unwell. She thought it was just a weather-related flu. "I'm fine," she told Foxworth over the phone, her voice as calm as ever. But to her colleagues, Elizabeth looked different: pale skin, short breaths, and a light in her eyes that seemed to be dimming. Back in Los Angeles, Foxworth persuaded her to go to Cedars-Sinai, the hospital that had treated many Hollywood stars. The results stunned the doctor's late-stage colorectal cancer cells, already metastasized to the liver. The news struck like lightning. After hearing it, Elizabeth sat in silence, clutching her robe. She asked only one question: "How long do I have?" The doctor didn't answer. But Elizabeth understood, and she chose a path only someone who believed in the magic of freedom could choose. She refused to be hospitalized. She said, "I don't want to die under the cold lights of a hospital. I want to see candlelight, hear music, and smell the wood of my house." A few days later, Elizabeth returned to her small Beverly Hills home, where she had planted jasmine and kept an old piano by the window. Robert Foxworth stayed by her side every night, holding her hand and reading letters from fans around the world. In those final days, she did something no one knew about until later. Foxworth recalled in a rare interview, "One evening, I walked into the room and saw her burning something in the fireplace. They were old letters, dozens, hundreds, all in her father, Robert Montgomery's, handwriting." Elizabeth didn't explain. She only smiled sadly. She kept a single photograph of the two of them taken in 1940 when she was 7. In it, little Elizabeth hugs her father, beaming. "It's the only photo where he ever looked at me. Gently," she whispered. Then she tucked the photo into the last page of her diary, where she had written, "Father never believed in magic. But I do, even if it's only to keep him in my heart." On May 18th, 1995, just 33 days after her 62nd birthday, Elizabeth Montgomery passed away in her sleep in that very house. Beside her was Foxworth, the only one present. No breathing tubes, no machine lights, only the scent of candles and the jazz she loved. News of her death spread across America. The press called it the passing of television's last classic witch. But soon after the funeral, strange stories began to appear. Within less than 10 years, a string of actors who had appeared on Bewitched, from Alice Pierce, Gladys Kravitz to Dick York, and Paul Lynde also died in middle age, most from illness or accident. Hollywood tabloids quickly spun a legend, the Bewitched curse. People said that Stage 5, after it was left unused, would have lights flickering at night. Some swore they saw the silhouette of a woman in a white dress passing through the doorway where Samantha's living room set used to be. A technician said I was shutting off the power when I heard someone laugh a light laugh like Samantha on TV. Of course, no one proved anything. But the rumors spread so fast that Screen Gems had to hire security for the lot. A Los Angeles Times reporter once wrote, "Perhaps they themselves invented the curse, for in Hollywood, nothing is more immortal than an unsolved legend." To those close to her, the curse wasn't supernatural. They said Elizabeth's death was simply the closing of a soul that had lived too intensely, a woman who always believed she could control everything, until she realized there is one force even Samantha could not subdue: human finitude. Her funeral was held quietly at the Cannon Theater in Beverly Hills. Herbie Hancock played the piece Elizabeth loved, and Robert Foxworth read the final lines from her journal. "If magic exists, it lives in human kindness, where love has never truly died." More than 3 decades have passed. Bewitched still airs on television. And every time Samantha twitches her nose, people remember Elizabeth Montgomery, the woman who made the world believe in magic, then left us to prove that every magic has its own shadow. Hollywood media still repeat a line that spread after her funeral, like a sad incantation. Anyone who ever stepped onto the Bewitched set carries with them a piece of its magic and its darkness. 30 years have passed since Elizabeth Montgomery's death, but only now has her daughter, Rebecca Asher, dared to confirm what Hollywood whispered for decades. My mother betrayed, loved, believed, and feared. But above all, she just wanted to be loved as an ordinary human being. That sentence, seemingly simple, was in fact the answer to everything. Behind the title of the Bewitched Witch, behind the roles, the rumors, and the spotlight, Elizabeth Montgomery was at her core just a woman searching for love, a love she never fully felt in her lifetime. Elizabeth Montgomery, whom audiences remember for her kind smile and bright eyes, was in reality a soul full of contradictions. Though she appeared calm on the outside, inside she raged an undercurrent, compassionate, yet lonely strong, yet afraid of being bound. Friends said Elizabeth was always the first to extend a helping hand to young actors, giving them chances, advice, and sometimes even money. Yet she was also the one who maintained an invisible distance from everyone, never letting anyone get too close to her private world. Her close friend, screenwriter Susan Harris, once said she had real magic, not from her nose twitch, but from her eyes. That look made you feel both seen and kept outside at the same time. In her later years, Elizabeth gradually withdrew from the set. She spent more time on social causes, joining children's charities, speaking out against the Vietnam War, and supporting the women's equality movement. Many believed it was her way of atoning for the past, for her conservative father, who once believed women were born only to stand behind men. Elizabeth once said in a 1989 interview, "I can't change what my father taught, but I can live by what he feared most, freedom." In her twilight years, she lived quietly in her Beverly Hills home with Robert Frisworth. That small house was filled with light candle scent and calm, but still held one thing: Elizabeth never truly let go of the shadow of her father. In 2025, during an exhibition commemorating the 30th anniversary of Elizabeth Montgomery's passing, her family unveiled something no one had ever seen before. A letter never sent, found in an old diary, placed beside a photograph of father and daughter, taken in 1940, the same photo she had kept during her final days. The letter read, "Dearest Father, it took me many years to understand why you never told me I was good, why you feared that I was like you. Now, I understand. Neither of us knew how to love without hurting. I forgive you. Perhaps I am more like you than I thought." Rebecca Asher, her daughter, read the letter aloud on camera during the memorial. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held pride. "My mother was not just an actress. She was the one who taught me that real magic doesn't live in a twitching nose, but in the courage to forgive even your own past." The room fell completely silent. Outside, a soft breeze brushed the old Bewitched posters, making Samantha's image seem to smile. 30 years later, Elizabeth Montgomery was still there, the woman who made the world believe in magic, but who never gained the one spell she longed for: to be loved by her father as his daughter. And perhaps that her small but eternally unfulfilled longing, was what made her the witch of the heart, the woman who, even after leaving this world, still makes people believe that within each of us there remains a little bit of magic, if only we know how to love and forgive. 30 years after Elizabeth Montgomery's death, her story still isn't over. Like Samantha's legendary nose twitch, just the name Elizabeth is enough to make people remember a golden age of television, of faith, and of tenderness tinged with shadow. That legend is not merely the story of a star, but a reminder to us all, behind every bit of magic lies a heart that has known pain. Elizabeth Montgomery was not only the bewitched witch, she was a woman who lived, loved, erred, and forgave in the most human way possible. And if any magic truly remains after 3 decades, it is the kind she left behind, the kind that makes us believe that kindness and courage can still soften every sorrow. If this story touches a corner of your heart, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to join us as we continue uncovering the secrets, the tragedies, and the remnants of magic left behind the lights of Hollywood. Because in that place where every smile casts a shadow and every legend leaves behind a whisper,